Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kelsey Kramer, and I'm a doctoral teaching fellow at Sam Houston State University, and I'll be moderating our discussion today. Today, we're going to discuss some of the most common concerns faculty have around using Packback, some of our initial concerns, and what we've learned along the way. But before we jump in, I want to quickly go over some housekeeping. We're joined in the chat by Ariam, a Packback team member who can answer Packback related questions you may have during the conversation. If you have questions for any of the instructors during the session today, you can either add them in the chat or you can post them in the Q&A designated session, and we can cover them during the last half of the presentation. So today we're going to hear from myself, Dr. Stephanie Craig, and Dr. Bryan McCarthy. And again, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited for an excellent conversation. So we're just going to start with some introductions from our panelists, and I'll just go ahead and kick us off. So again, my name is Kelsey Kramer. I'm a doctoral teaching fellow in the College of Criminal Justice at Sam Houston State University, and I've been using Packback for about 2 semesters now, and I'm very excited to be here and moderating this really important conversation. So Stephanie, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Bryan.
Already forgot to unmute myself, so let's see how many times I do that today. So my name is Stephanie Craig. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at York University in Toronto, Ontario, so Canada. I've been using Packback for 1 semester.
My name is Bryan McCarthy, and I teach philosophy at the University of Pittsburgh, Greensburg, and I have been using Packback for, I guess, a couple of years. So I'm not exactly sure how long that is. It was maybe about a year before the pandemic started, so I guess it's about 2 to 2.5 years or something like that. And I love it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie and Bryan. So before we jump into our planned content, I want to share a bit about the platform that we use for our discussions. And this is just in case any of you are new to Packback in general. So Packback is an inquiry-based, online student-driven discussion platform that uses instructor-driven feedback coupled with instant smart feedback to empower students to express their curiosity through open-ended questions. And we'll share more about Packback along the way, but for now, I'd love to just start our first common concern, among instructors looking to adopt new technology. Okay, so what will happen if I adopt a student-led approach to discussion? So many instructors are nervous about switching from a fully instructor-led discussion to a student-led discussion, especially having to give up some of the control over the discussion. So how would you speak to these concerns as an instructor considering Packback? Bryan, if you want to go ahead and start, and then we'll go ahead and Stephanie will have you answer as well.
Yes, I think that I wouldn't be too nervous about this. I mean, the main thing is that when we say student-led, I mean, you're really being led only in the sense that they get to kind of give you a sort of a panoply of different things that they're thinking about, and you can sort of pick the ones that you think are the most interesting or the most germane to what you want to talk about. And depending on how worried about this you are, how open you are, you can pretty much stick to the plan, because a third of your students at least are going to be asking questions about stuff that you think is important and that is already part of your agenda anyway, and you can just stick with that stuff if that's what you want to do. Or you can be a little more flexible or open or more student-led and just see what's there that you didn't think of or that you weren't already it wasn't already part of your agenda. And then if there's something there that's interesting, you can kind of move into that. But it's not as if like just any crazy question that comes up is something that has to drive the agenda for the discussion. So, you're still in charge, and it just gives you a little bit more information, a little bit more of a kind of feedback loop. And yes, there may be a crazy question that one of the other students thinks is interesting and responds to, but that doesn't mean you have to, give it center stage in the class or anything like that.
Awesome. Yeah, Stephanie, do you want to go ahead and throw your input in as well?
Yeah, so I missed that at the beginning with my introduction. I'm in psychology, so I'm going to kind of answer this from a science adjacent perspective. And one of the things that's really important in my field is research questions, developing research ideas, developing research questions. And, this idea of it being student-led, well, their own interests should be student-led. Like, that makes complete sense for what we're trying to develop in the students. The way that I use Packback personally is that I had whatever the topic of that week was in class, that was what they had to write about something. So I was teaching a class in adolescence, so they had to write, say, about gender one week, or about peers or aggression another week. And they took that in really interesting ways that kind of started to develop their own interests. And that also helped them then with their papers later on. So I think, this idea of it being student-led, they should be finding their passions, they should be finding their own interests. So to me, it actually just built on what I wanted to accomplish in them anyway. That being said, I was able to kind of highlight each week, both in my lecture, I would pick out a couple of questions I thought were really good, and also through feedback on the platform itself, questions that I thought we really could start digging into as a class. Now, I had a very large class at 180, so it's a bit hard, but it really depends on how you use the platform and your goals for your students in the class.
Yeah, I would say I'll echo much of what Stephanie and Bryan have kind of already said. When it comes to like letting go of control, realistically, Packback is useful to instructors because it allows you to relinquish a little bit of that control over what people are posting. And like Stephanie said, it really should be up to the students what they're interested in, what they're posting. And I would just say, like, these concerns may come up for some instructors, but for a lot of us, using this type of platform is really useful, especially depending on the class that you're teaching, right? What the goals are, how you introduce it to your class. But I have had a great experience using Packback, and I really didn't have any concerns over giving up some control, because like Bryan said, you really aren't giving up any control when it comes to Packback. You're still, it's still being moderated by Packback. You still have access to it. You can respond to those students. You can help coach them and help them improve their writing skills. And so there's a lot of benefits to using Packback also. Did y'all have anything else you wanted to add onto this one before we move on to the next section? Okay, awesome. Okay, another big consideration for most instructors is thinking about how Packback will fit into an existing course design. So Bryan, again, if you want to take a stab at this question first, and then Stephanie. So how did you think about how to fit Packback into your course, particularly in the course design and structure?
Well, I actually used this to solve a problem I was having a while back, which was that students wouldn't read the stuff that they were supposed to read and that we were going to talk about. And so I use this as more of a kind of way to ensure that they were actually reading. And they probably don't read the whole assignment anyway, the whole reading, but they have to read at least enough to develop an interesting question about something, and to, and then they have to put enough in the description to show that they've thought about it, or that they've read some of it or something. And so really it was sort of a way to kind of make sure that they'd read a little bit, so that whenever they show up in class, we have something to kind of work with, to talk about. So I kind of use these as sometimes directly as a way to, like sometimes I'll directly like go through the packbacks and find the ones that I want to highlight in class and talk about in class. But even if I don't do that on a given week, just the fact that they've done it means that they've got something that they can talk about whenever they get into the class. And that was less the case before. And, you know, you could do this with a normal discussion board, but then the problem is that you've got to go in and read them all and make sure that they're high quality yourself, and you have to grade them. And that just takes a long time. And I know a lot of professors who just don't do discussion boards because they don't like that. And I don't like it either. So this sort of circumvents that problem. And you still, you know, you have to read some of them if you want the students to think you're not just giving them busy work. You know, you need to like bring it up every now and then, talk about their posts, and, you know, show them that it's important to you. But you don't have to read every word of every post and every response and checking for quality and all of that stuff. So that's what it gives you the ability to have them come in and have that kind of discussion, and, you know, sort of force them to have thought about it a little bit in a at least a medium quality way without you having to actually go in and police them constantly.
Awesome. Yeah. Stephanie, did you want to go ahead and take on the question also?
Yeah, so I saw this. So I implemented this during COVID, and when on Canadian schools, or at least Ontario schools, we're all online, and we still are all online. And one of the things I was really concerned about having 180 kids in my class, even if we're in person, is that you don't get a lot of personal engagement. Like they might show up to lecture, or like, but they don't really care so much about the course content. And again, they don't really develop their own interest. And one of the things that I found over COVID was that most other instructors were also doing recorded lectures. So they were missing that engagement. The students were missing that engagement. And I thought that this was like, I knew I wanted to do some sort of discussion board to kind of start to get that engagement out of my students and have them feel like, one, I care about what they're writing about, and I absolutely do, but also that they can start talking to their peers and they can engage that way. And I find that online forums is a very common way that students in university age do communicate, like Reddit and, you know, Twitter and all of that. So I find that having that similar kind of framework of it's kind of like a forum felt very comfortable for them. So I actually, when we first started, kind of had moderate expectations of like, yeah, at least they'll be engaged. And as the first couple of weeks went through, my TAs and I noticed that the questions they were coming up with and the responses were like well researched, and they were bringing in outside resources, and they were learning research skills on top of just answering the question. And we were so impressed with them. I actually increased the amount that Packback participation was worth on their final grade. And we ended up like just constantly increasing our curiosity scores over the course of the semester. And I feel like it gave them a sense of accomplishment, a sense of confidence of like, okay, I've got this, I'm actually learning something. And it was this interactive aspect. So how it fit into my course actually shifted as the semester went, and I learned more about the program, and I started integrating it more into the class. So it's a very broad, wide ranging. I think it really depends, again, on what your goals are as an instructor.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I do agree that it varies depending on the goals of who's teaching whatever class Packback is being used in. So I teach a research methods class. So how I use Packback in my course is to expand their knowledge on research methods, ethics, things surrounding the research process. And so Packback's been really great in terms of fitting it into my course, because I'm able to ask them to go out and do their own research, ask a question, provide evidence for why that question is important, or for how it fits into the course material for the week, or across the semester. Sometimes I like to use like a more cumulative approach to Packback and ask them like, how does this fit into what we talked about last week also, but in addition to that, how does it fit for what we're talking about currently as well? And so this was actually a concern of mine when I first started talking with the Packback onboarding team, was how it was going to fit into my class. And thankfully, they were really great. And they actually pulled up another course community, which is where your students will post their discussion posts. And they showed me like, hey, this is how other instructors have used this in their class, particularly in another research methods class. And so that was really helpful for showing how I would be able to fit it into my course as well. So yeah, Bryan and Stephanie, yeah, I mean, it really, like you guys said, it depends on how the instructor truly uses Packback in their class and what their expectations are. But I found that also my students, like I set my minimum curiosity score to 40 the first semester I used Packback, and quickly found that they were way more advanced than where I started. And I had to bump it up like almost immediately because they were doing such a great job with their posts. And so I was really happy to see that they were not only learning, but also like excited about what they were talking about in the discussion post. And to Bryan's point, even as well, like it does take away a lot of the pressure of grading, especially when you have large classes, which is super nice because Packback kind of takes care of that for you. And so, yeah. Stephanie, Bryan, did you guys have anything else you want to add for this particular question before we jump on to the next one? Awesome. Okay, we'll go ahead and continue. Okay, so we're going to move on to fear number 2. And so this question is, what if my students don't like the platform? So aside from the unfamiliarity with the student-centered model, sometimes instructors are rightfully often wary of implementing this new technology, and sometimes students don't necessarily like this new technology. So we're going to talk about that. So Bryan, if you want to go ahead and go first again, what were some of your considerations around student perceptions when adopting Packback?
Well, I mean, I think first you sort of have to get comfortable with the more or less the fact that no students are going to like. I mean, there's not going to be anything you do that every single student in the room likes, and Packback's no exception. So that's just a kind of an unfortunate thing. But I think what you can kind of expect is for a couple of students not to like it, and a couple of students really to love it, and most of the other people to be kind of in between. In a class of say 20 or 30 people, you'll have a few of each of the kind of strong opinions, and then everybody else is going to be pretty sort of go with it to varying degrees of affinity. And so it works like basically everything else. Like whenever you get your evaluations for other things that you do, and you see some people that really like it and some people that really hate it, and like how are you supposed to implement that feedback? It's impossible. And so you just kind of look for the sort of the trends. And one thing I can say is that students like it more if you highlight their post in class. And there are some students that are mortified by that and hate it. So it's not like every student's going to like that either. But if you can, but just sort of some of them, it sort of shows them that you are doing more than giving them busy work, which is, I think, for those who really object to it, that's the thing they object to most. The other thing that I do is I kind of like, students by and large, unless you say something ridiculous, are going to kind of take your framing for things. So when I kind of start out the class, I sort of tell them that this is, I mean, philosophy is hard, and there are many subjects that are hard like that, and not all students are going to be good at it, at least not immediately. And you're kind of there to help them get better at whatever it is you're teaching them. But to avoid making the entire class and their grade in it depending on talent, or being really awesome at something they've never even encountered before. I say that I put in this thing as more of a kind of reward for consistency and discipline, and just kind of working hard effort, if you like, because they don't have to do that much to get the requisite points, even if you're including curiosity points as part of their grade, which not everyone does. But even if you do, I do, and I set my barrier at 65. It doesn't take that much to beat that barrier. Lots of the students who actually give it some time get in the 80s or 90s every week, and they're not even the most talented students. So it's not like a talent thing. And so basically I'm telling them, hey, this is one aspect of your grade that is not based on talent. It's just based on doing what you're supposed to do. And so then that sort of puts it in a different kind of light than busy work or having to do something every week. It's not that you have to do something every week, it's that you get to, rather than being stuck with a grade based on two quizzes or two tests and a paper or something like that. You're giving them, there's like 15 things, and if they blow one, it's not the end of their grade. So you can kind of like reframe the way that they might ordinarily perceive negatively certain aspects of the thing. You can kind of reframe those in a positive way that makes them thinking about it in a whole new way before they even get to the point of not liking it. But again, having said all that, you're still going to have some people that just don't like it and they don't care what you say. So, but that happens with all sorts of things, and those sorts of students are usually the kind that you kind of have to decide not to worry about anyway.
Awesome. Thank you. Stephanie, go ahead and tell us about your considerations.
Yeah, so I knew a lot of other profs were using our online, our e-class, which is our online education tool for discussion boards. So I knew that a lot of the students already had experience with that. So I was a little wary of this is going to be different for them. They're going to have to learn a new technology type thing. And there's also, and I'll the cost, right? Whenever you implement anything that has a cost for students, you're going to hear complaints. So I'm a numbers person. I am a stats person. So what did I do? Of course, I took a survey in my class halfway through the semester. And 89% of my students said that they liked Packback, which I don't think I have 89% of my students agree on anything. So, and that's of the people who participated. I think I had 60 people participate. So it was a smaller sample, but still, that's a decent number of my students saying that they really enjoy this. And in the comments that they had in this mid-semester anonymous survey that I did, they were saying they found it really engaging, but they also said things like, Dr. Craig really cares about what we are interested in. And like their perception of me as an instructor, I think, was modified by Packback, because I could respond to their questions. I could bring up their questions and bring them into class. I also would give them feedback after meeting with my experience manager and finding out, I think our average curiosity score, and this is again 180 students, our average was 83, 84, maybe a little lower, maybe 81, 82, which was like remarkably high. I think for them to have to pass, I think was a 65, and we're averaging 80. So every time I brought that up in the class, they would get more encouraged and being encouraging each other in the chat to be like, oh, we got to get it up to 90. Like, so I think there was a little bit of internal motivation there as well. So I think the more I incorporated it into class, the more they liked it. I did also ask the class about whether it's worth the cost versus the e-class. And more than half the class said, yeah, it was worth the cost. So I think, they're aware of, this is a new technology. There is a bit of a cost to it. But they're understanding that they are actually getting a little bit more out of it than say an e-class discussion board, where all of my energy is going to go into marking and not into responding to each of their conversations or each of their posts. They also, I think, really liked the fact that they could bring in different topics into the discussion board and not just worry about, this is my response to the reading, which is more like a journal type thing. So that was my experience in terms of perception.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I will say similarly to Stephanie that I was concerned about the cost because students are already having to pay for textbooks, perhaps other materials in classes. And so that was one of my biggest concerns about what students would think is, oh, now I have to pay for Packback. But the nice thing is when you use Packback in multiple courses, you get a little bit of a discount across those courses for using Packback. And so that was something that really helped with my decision to adopt Packback in my class in general. But I will say that I have had students tell me they really like Packback, but then much like what Bryan said, there will be some students who don't like it, and you kind of just have to take it with a grain of salt and move on. And, not everyone's going to like the technology or what you do in your class, and that's just something you have to be okay with as an instructor. But I will say, again, most of my students really enjoy Packback. Stephanie, I'm going to have to get those questions from you so that I can ask my students and survey them. Since it is a research methods class, that would be perfect. We can look at the numbers in class. But yeah, so I think really cost was my biggest concern regarding student perceptions. And yeah, with that, let's go ahead and keep on jamming through this section. Okay, so what was y'all's experience with student perceptions after using Packback? Stephanie, do you want to go ahead and answer that one first?
I'm super aware of time and Bryan's time, and I think I answered this kind of in the last section.
Sure.
So I'm going to pass, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Bryan, did you have anything you wanted to add for this one? No, okay, that's okay. Yeah, we'll keep going. Okay, so how did you guys introduce and explain Packback to your course to help set good expectations and set your class up for success? Any input on that one?
I just introduced it as another component of the class, like I would anything. And I was actually, there was a couple very new things that I was doing in my class, including they had to do an infographic. So again, they had experience with doing online discussion boards in other classes, and this was just kind of a new thing. It took a week or two for them to kind of get into the groove of it, but they picked it up remarkably fast. I think, again, right now with the popularity of things like Reddit and Twitter, and the fact that Packback looks so much or feels so much like those other online social media sources, it didn't really make a big impact. And then I think going over each week, here's our average curiosity score, here's how we're doing, like kind of giving them little mini feedback at the very beginning of lecture helped them figure out, okay, this is how I do better on it, this is how I kind of use it to shift things. I also will say that in the middle of my semester, because everybody kind of got lazy and was like, if the topic was, I don't know, peers, how are friends doing during COVID? If it was school, how are kids doing in school during COVID? Like everything was they just add during COVID at the end. And so I banned that. I essentially said, you're not allowed to ask, just if it's a very specific question, you can, but you can't just ask during COVID. And then that got them to expand their questions again. So it's just how you're using it week to week, bringing it in to the class, modified how they used it.
Awesome. Bryan, do you have anything on that one as well?
Yes, and I appreciate, Stephanie, you're noting the time. She's saying that because I have to teach like pretty quickly and gonna have to duck out a little bit early here. But I usually talk about this now in the context of the new features that they have, where that helps moderate. And I'm basically, in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, the question is, like, we have Canvas, which has a perfectly good discussion forum, and so I know that one of the things they're always thinking is, why aren't you just using that? Besides that, it grades for you. Like, that's your job. Why are you like, why am I paying to keep you from having to grade? And so I've always got that in the back of my head. Does it do anything else besides help me grade? And what I tell them is that it produces higher quality posts, and especially now that along the side, it coaches them through doing a quality post. And so they can virtually guarantee that they're going to get the points for a high quality post without me having to be there to hold their hands through, because Packback holds their hands. And so it's in their interest as well as mine.
Awesome. Yeah, I have the same answers as Stephanie and Bryan. So for time's sake, we'll just go ahead and move on. And Bryan, do you have to duck out now, or are you good for a couple more minutes?
I've got maybe, I have to get across campus, but I can do that. I could leave in 10-ish minutes and be still good.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and finish up, and then we'll let you get out of here so you can go teach. Okay, so the last fear is, do I really want to let a platform help me moderate my class? And so another initial piece that can be really nerve-wracking is Packback's digital TA, which is done through IA, and that's the moderation of student discussion posts. And so Bryan and Stephanie, what was your guys' experience using Packback's AI? And either one of you can go, whoever wants to take it first.
We're stopping a stoplight to stare at each other, right? So it was funny as we were kind of preparing for this conversation. I actually asked everybody, I was like, did you guys get any big moderations in your posts, or like were people pretty civil? And I personally, I think maybe one or two came up, and the AI was more about the moderation was more about plagiarism. And I think for me, that's great learning opportunity for the students, because we already use things like Turnitin, right? They're used to that. They're used to being caught kind of, by technology for things like plagiarism. So it's them learning to start putting things in their own words. I will share one experience that I had where I was very concerned about a question that came up. It was a week on gender, and someone had brought up a topic about trans non-binary youth, and the way the question was posed was very respectful. However, I'm also aware that it could have gone sideways very fast in the students' response to these questions, and I got a bit nervous. And I'm aware that the AI on Packback is checked by a human moderator. However, I wasn't sure if it would pick up disrespectful posts that didn't kind of meet a threshold. And one of the Packback experience assistants, sorry, I forget the term, actually personally assured me that they would be checking that particular post, because I was so concerned about it, and it turned out it was fine. My class was very, very respectful. But I just want to kind of emphasize the fact that even though, yes, the AI is there, that Packback's team is actually there for us as well. And I was quite impressed with that.
Awesome. Bryan, you want to go ahead and tell us your experience with the AI as well?
I think Stephanie pretty much covered everything that I would have been thinking to add. She did a really good job at it. I mean, I think the AI is good. It's most of the time whenever it moderates somebody, they deserve it. So.
That's fair. Yeah. I think the only moderation that I've had is a student posted a close-ended question, and it moderated it, just telling them that they needed to post an open-ended question. So really, yeah, I also haven't had really any issues with the Packback's AI in terms of moderation. So.
Yeah, I occasionally have to moderate them myself because they talked about the topic from last week and the AI is not that good. But
that's fair. Yeah, I find that sometimes that happens in my class too.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, yeah, so that actually brings us to the end of our discussion. And so we want to open it up to the audience for a question and answer session. Bryan, I know that your time is short, so if you'd like to jump off before the Q&A starts, you're welcome to, or if you can stick around for a few minutes, that'd be great as well.
I can hang around for a little bit. Can I add something at the end though? Something
absolutely.
by these questions I think people should know. For me, like the best part about using this software is the experience managers and the relationship that you have with them and the ideas that they come up with for the things that you can do. And I think I probably would be, it's a nice software, but I think I would be way less passionate about it if it weren't for the experience managers. They're really quite amazing, and the best part of it as far as I'm concerned.
I can completely agree. I think Stephanie, you agree too.
Yeah. I think that I've never had, and I've used other online components, like for my stats course is an online component to the book. And I met with the person for that online component once. And like, sure, if there was a technical problem, we could have messaged them, but like, what would we get? Like, I got monthly check-ins, I think, or at least every few weeks. And my experience managers not only knew my community itself, but like was able to put how my community was doing compared to other communities. And I've joked on Twitter that we should just have like a race each for like who can get the highest experience points, because like So I said that really motivated my students. So like getting the kind of macro feedback like that was actually quite helpful in terms of motivating and my students feeling proud that they were doing so well.
That's fabulous. I should do that in my class and have them compete for the highest, curiosity points or experience points. That's a good idea. Maybe some extra credit in there. Yeah, so now we want to open it up to the Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and open that and we'll just answer some of these questions. Okay, so the first one is from Marion and it says, how do you get students to use it? Many of my students do not like it or know what to do to use it to get curiosity points. So Bryan, Stephanie, do y'all have any input on this one?
Can I say something real fast? There's another question there that's technically answered because I asked a follow-up question about it. I don't even know if you can still see it, but it's in the other kind of thing. I just want to make sure that if I end up ducking out, that person's question gets answered.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so this question says, I wonder how to control misinformation or denial of science when a student's peers don't jump in. I don't necessarily have time either in the moment or even later. I recently had a post that is going to require some research students can digest. And Bryan followed up by asking, are you asking how to control it when you catch it or how to catch it in the first place? So I'm not sure, this one was anonymous. So I think perhaps they're asking how to control it when it happens. And that's probably what I would go with.
I'll take a stab. It didn't come up as much with mine, but I definitely had I had a lot of students use non-scientific websites to kind of like psych news or psych whatever, like because there's a lot of non-scientific psych websites. And at that point, I kind of asked them if they're going to make a claim to be using academic articles. And again, I think it's a bit of a teaching opportunity to learn how to back yourself up with academic articles rather than pop culture articles. So that was one way that I kind of got around that. If there was something that was like way off, then there is that chance that there's an opportunity too of correcting it and saying, I have to address this later. But yeah, for the most part, I think it's teaching them what is good research, what should we be using to back ourselves up in our points.
Yeah, I'll just add in my 2 cents. So my class is a research methods class, so I teach them how to find peer-reviewed journal articles, how to do good research. I also teach a class on how to evaluate the credibility of sources, and that includes news sources, periodicals, things like that. So I think maybe just up front, if in your class you're able to, maybe have a conversation with them about what is okay to use and what isn't. And I think that will kind of help control it. And if it doesn't, then obviously you could on Packback coach them or have it be moderated and go from there. Bryan, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Muted.
Yeah, I know. I'm hitting it. It's muting it, unmuting and muting it all at once. I'm like rapid fire because I'm trying to hurry. So I'm answering another one of the questions about. I should probably just say this out loud, but it says how much time do they have to spend? I really think you could do it in 15 minutes and to get a good curiosity score. But I have had students who kind of get into it and say that they've taken more like 45 minutes or even over an hour. But I don't think you need to do it that much. In my class, they have to read and they're posting about what they're reading. So reading takes time, but I don't think it's really that onerous. And remember, Peter, that there's a thing along the side that tells you how you're doing and what you need to do to fix it. So there's like, if you have bad grammar and you fix it, you watch they don't give you the exact score that you're earning, they give you a range, but you watch that range go up as you add the things that they tell you to add. And so they'll be able to get a sense really quickly of how much this is going to require of them, even while they're doing it.
Awesome, yeah.
So I wonder, can we just go back to that other, because we had asked the question and kind of jumped off of it. How do you get students to use it?
Yeah.
So my suggestion would be, and this is what I do with a lot of things, is I take 5-10 minutes at the beginning of class and I share my screen and I show them exactly how to use it and go on the website, and this is how you get the curiosity points, and you kind of walk them through that. That would be my suggestion. And I show them, like, when I add more content, see my curiosity score is going up. When I add a website, see my curiosity score is going up. So I kind of just do it that way.
Yep, I completely agree with what Stephanie just said. That's how I do it with my students as well.
Somebody also asked in the chat that people say, I don't believe in water scarcity. That's ridiculous with all the oceans, lakes, rivers. We have huge amounts of water and oil. So again, it's, I mean, it's, I'm not going to go into the actual content of that, but I think, again, it goes back to you making claims with, having to back yourself up with appropriate resources. And the nice thing about Packback is they do have that thing at the bottom of your response where you actually put in the reference of where you got it. So I think that, going through what's an appropriate reference, okay, if you can find an appropriate peer review reference that says we don't have water scarcity, you go for it. And it's learning how to make, rather than, we're not going to change everybody's mind about everything, but we can teach people how to appropriately back themselves up with their arguments. So it depends on what your goal is there.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, Bryan just wrote that he's got to run.
Oh, okay. Bye, Bryan. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. And
Hi, everybody. It was super fun.
You have a good class.
Thank you. Appreciate it. You guys have a good day.
Bye.
Thanks. All right. So we do have some other questions. Stephanie, you're good for a few more minutes, right?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So this one's from Carly. Was anyone here cold called for getting on board with the Packback system? If so, what was your experience like being cold called? What stood out? I'm not sure how Stephanie got introduced to Packback, but I was cold called in my office. I got a call from Noah, who is part of the Packback onboarding team. And he was so nice and just explained to me what Packback was, and asked me if I'd be interested in setting up a almost like a tutorial of what Packback included, what it was, all the information about it, what it costs, things like that. And so though the call that itself was easy and it didn't take very long. And then I set up an appointment to meet with Noah further, and he explained everything to me, went through what Packback is, how it works, what the AI is, how much it costs, what we can do if students have struggles with paying for Packback. So all of that information. And so I think, yeah, it was a really simple and easy experience. And because they were so informative, I think that's kind of what stood out, is that they knew the product and they were extremely helpful in getting me set up. And so that's kind of my response to that. I don't know, Stephanie, you have a similar or different?
I was not cold called. In fact, I'm going to be blunt here. If I was, I probably would have deleted the call or deleted the message and moved on. I don't like being cold called about products. I get cold called about products all the time. Being a psychologist as well, I get therapy stuff. However, I was referred by a friend who taught the same course at University of Victoria. And I was looking for an online discussion board. There was a couple of different ones. I had noticed that some faculty in my department were using a different online discussion board. So I was looking into that one and trying to understand it. So when I was introduced to it, it was a personal recommendation. I would love to keep referring my own faculty to the product. I have run into a bit of an issue because we have tried to do this through our university. I don't know if it's a Canadian university thing or just in general, but I can't even pitch the giving an introduction to this program to my faculty because it is a paid for product. So if I ever pitch it in some sort of for teaching talk or whatever, it has to be kind of incorporated with other things. So my poor experience as managers, Raman and M, did all this work for me putting together a presentation, and I wasn't actually able to present it. So I try to talk to colleagues. I promote it on Twitter all the time, and apparently have become popular within the Packback community for doing that, because I want to get the information out. And I do think from, you know, a teaching perspective, these things grow much more through word of mouth than they do through kind of cold calls or cold emails. Or you learn about it at like teaching events, like workshops and whatnot, when people are talking about these different things. So that was my experience with it. I know I kind of went off on a tangent there, but that was my experience for it. I think it's hard for the Packback folks, but it's also hard for the faculty, because we do get quite overwhelmed, right? Of like the people pitching different products, and, you know, word of mouth is kind of the way that worked for me.
Yeah, I also tweet about Packback a lot. So that's kind of how I ended up here with you all today. But yeah, I think this is also part of Carly's question, and I think you may have answered this. So what would be a great way to be respectful of university faculty, if not through cold calling? And I think you kind of already hit on that, Stephanie. So this one is part of the question that Marion asked earlier. So how do you get students to use Packback, which I know Bryan did touch on. It asks, or it says, I explained, you know, what was going on and went through it all with the class at the beginning of the semester. And so I guess from this like point of view, or from what you've said, I would use the coaching option on Packback. And I would coach that student individually about, you know, credible articles, maybe send them some resources. And then if something like this continues to happen throughout the semester, it might be worth it to just meet with that student individually, whether that's via Zoom or in person, whatever you are most comfortable with. But I would definitely just try and keep like reiterating the importance of using scientific knowledge, and also, you know, evidence to support their points or their, you know, question that they're asking. But yeah, that's definitely a tough situation. I don't know if Stephanie, you have any other input on this one.
No, I think definitely repetition. Or sometimes what I'll do is, if there's things that are coming up that students are struggling with, I offer an office hour, online office hour, where again, I open up the website and I go through it in like insane details. In like, you do this and then you do this, and then they can ask all the questions that they want without taking up class time. And I've done that with like how to find good research articles, or, you know, how to do, like when we were doing infographics, how do you make infographics, all of that stuff. So I think sometimes students just need extra kind of hand holding, and taking that extra hour, one, it gets rid of like kind of the effort of needing to tutor individual students, but it also makes the students feel a little bit more supported in something that they might be quite nervous about, that's something new. So that would be what I would suggest, is maybe doing an extra kind of office hour. I call it coffee hour because I hate the word office hour, but an extra hour on a Zoom call with a bunch of students to let them ask what they need to ask. Somebody, I don't know if you saw in the chat, Lynn said that I've decided to require students to use terms from the text to avoid getting random questions like, do you think cats see in 3D in a business intro? So what I did personally is that they had to write about that week's topic. So whatever it was I was lecturing on, they had to write about. And then actually over the course of the term, I had 14 potential weeks that they could write something in Packback, but they only had to do 10. So on the weeks that I didn't lecture, so like reading week or even the exam weeks, I had it open. It was a free for all. You can ask about anything in the course material. But for the weeks that I lectured, it had to be on that lecture. And I found that that narrowed down the topics. I didn't get any weird do cats see in 3D questions, but I don't know. We also, at the very beginning, I responded to a lot of the posts so that they knew we were watching, and then kind of brought it back down to a more sustainable level as the semester went on.
Yeah, I will say that similarly to Stephanie, in my class, and in the classes that I've TA'd for that use Packback, the expectation is that the student would post something related to the course content for the week. And that is just established at the beginning of the semester. Normally when I establish like how Packback fits into my class, I usually talk about that. Sometimes I do utilize a more traditional discussion board style where I give them a prompt that they have to respond to. And then they can kind of like freely discuss it between themselves. But there are other weeks where I allow them to choose something just related to the class or something related to research methods. And they're allowed to ask whatever questions they want as long as it fits within what we've discussed for the week. And so that's kind of how to kind of get around those like funky questions, I think. So yeah. Let's see, so Lynn posted mine are expected to ask a question about the content for that module. Yeah. So I don't know what the student was thinking.
I mean, they may just have been trying to sneak one by so they didn't have to try. I don't know. Like that's, as I said, I got a lot of students that like by the midterm, they were getting lazy and it was just like, what about peers in COVID? And like 90% of the questions for that. And that's why I had to kind of call them out in lecture. And now all of my, sorry, I need to not look at the chat. This is why I always close the chat when I lecture, because then I get distracted. Completely lost my train of thought. Sorry. I don't even remember where I was going with it. I apologize, guys. This is why my TAs always moderate my chat. I never look at it because I get very distracted by the chat.
You're good. Yeah, I think sometimes students just try and post questions because that gives them points for the week. And I think that might be what you were like getting at.
Yeah, and it got boring for us to read, and it got boring for the students to answer, because then like at 180 kids, or students, pardon me, they were all asking the same thing. And so when I call them out in class on it, and again, I do synchronous lecture, so I actually lecture live. I can see them talking to each other in the chat and be like, all right, guys, come on, we can do better. And like actually encouraging each other to do a little bit better. And then I got way more interesting responses. And then when I did it for their assignment later on, and I was like, okay, you guys can write about teens during COVID, but please don't everybody do that, because that's 180 essays on teens during COVID. And that's a lot. You know, it developed their interest outside of just what's happening in this moment. And I think right now that's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so Marion also posted in the Q&A, she uses QuickBooks and they watch a video and come up with a question about how something is done in QuickBooks. And it's an asynchronous course, but she holds virtual office hours. So I think her original questions, was how do you get students to use it? With an online class like that, I think maybe even just, filming like a short video view introducing Packback to the class might serve as a great useful tool for them, just so that you can show them like, hey, this, hi, I'm your instructor, and show them Packback. This is how we're going to use Packback in this class. These are the expectations around Packback. And just kind of go like that. I actually incorporate information on Packback during my syllabus day. It's in my syllabus, but then I also have slides dedicated to Packback when I talk about my syllabus, specifically like what it means to be moderated, what it means to be coached, how much Packback is worth in this class. And then I go through how to use it so that there's less questions about how do I use this platform, or like, what do I do? And that really cuts down on the questions that come up throughout the semester, because we're hitting it like head on right at the beginning. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how I would use it. Even in a virtual class, I would just cover it right at the front and just talk about it.
Peter asked, what's the minimum size to make Packback worthwhile? I had a very large class, and I was quite worried, because that's a lot of answers to be going through, because they're asking one question and answering 2 each week. And so there's a lot of responses to go through. Now, again, with having, they do 10 out of 14, it wasn't every student every week, but it was still well over 100 students each week. I think it could be very different in a smaller class where they actually can start to get to know each other and like build off each other's ideas, and you can start incorporating it in the real class as well, like the synchronous class as well. So I think it will just act differently depending on the size of the class, and how you want to use it. Again, I brought in, by the end of the semester, I was deciding to bring in my favorite two questions. And I actually knocked off their names. I didn't embarrass anybody, but I blocked their name off, and I just like print screened and then edited the picture. And then I had them vote, which one would you like me to answer in class? And so that actually brought up a little bit of a discussion. And I had 80 some odd students attending my class each week out of 180. I call that a win. But they got really into it, and then they started posting in the chat, and so it actually brought, you can bring it into the class that way. If you're in a smaller class, I imagine you can do it quite similarly, where you're actually bringing in some of the questions that are brought up during the week into the class. So
that was so eloquently said, Stephanie.
Once in a while I do that, and once in a while I completely blank on what I'm saying. So,
Same, I totally get it. Yeah, Peter, so I have used Packback in a class of 11 students. And I find that even though there is a small number of students in the class, that Packback is still a useful tool, because it gets them thinking about things that relate to the course content, but maybe things that we're not necessarily covering specifically. So it allows them to kind of engage outside information, outside knowledge, and kind of expand their viewpoints on things. Maybe it changes their opinion on certain things. And so I find that there really isn't a minimum size that needs to be included to use Packback and to make it a useful tool in a classroom. Now, keep in mind, like, this may be different depending on the class that you use and what you would like to use Packback for. But in my class specifically, we use it so that we can broaden our knowledge about research methods to the outside world, essentially. So not just in a controlled environment or within the classroom. And so, yeah, even with 11 students, I will say, like, the discussion posts were phenomenal compared to what I believe I would have gotten had I used a traditional LMS discussion board on, say, like Blackboard or Canvas. So I hope that answers your question.
So I know we're kind of running out of time. I just want to add one more point, which is, especially right now, for anybody who's still teaching online, or anyone who has very large classes. I've taught in-person large classes and online large classes, and I felt like the Packback was the first time that I was recognizing students' names, that I was putting students' names to their interests. It made the community, in a 180-person class, it made the community feel like a community and feel smaller. And I think for me, that was a huge benefit. And I think for my students, that was a huge benefit. So outside of like the learning, yes, they were asking great questions. Yes, they were getting that scientific training. But in a time where we feel very separated and we're struggling kind of socially, it gave them a little bit of support. And that was what I heard in my reviews at the end of the semester, was that they loved it. They loved the support they got, and they felt cared about by myself and the TAs, because we were responding directly to them. We were bringing it in. So I just wanted to kind of add that extra benefit, because I don't think it's something that we think about when we add in different components into our class.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have really much to add to that. I think Stephanie kind of hit it home right there. It's such an easy way to engage with your students beyond the classroom, especially during these times where you may not even see them in a real classroom. Yeah, I mean, from my experience, I have taught hybrid, in person, and I'll be teaching online next semester, and I will continue to use Packback in my class because it gives them a way to be a little bit more individualized, but also helps me connect with them beyond what I would be able to in a traditional classroom setting. So yeah, I think if there's no more questions, we can go ahead and, oh, hold on. Let's see here. We have one more thing. Okay, so Lynn says, I've used Packback for several courses already and love it. But if all 30 students can potentially ask a different questions, most do not get replies. Sometimes that happens. I have students that don't necessarily get replies from their classmates. Usually if that happens, I will try and respond to some of them so that they do get some type of response. But yeah, with that number of students, right, like it is a smaller course, so they may not be getting as many responses. It also depends on how many responses you require when you're setting your Packback expectations. So my students are all required to post an original question and then 2 response posts. I think you could increase that if you really wanted to, but that might be a lot of additional work for the students. So in that event, I usually try and, like I said, just respond to my students, or at least a few of them, so that they are like understanding, or that they know that I'm still reading through them and I also care about what they have to say, even if their classmates didn't necessarily respond.
Just a very, very quick thing to add to that. I think that's science in action for you right there, or that's research in action for you right there. You can ask a really cool research question, but if nobody's interested in it, the research doesn't really move. And so I think that it's kind of a natural way of, you'll get a few that have a ton of responses and people get really into that conversation. And then some that don't get any. And I think that that's just, it's learnings too from the students of like, okay, what is a good question? Because the good questions do get a lot of responses. So it is a bit of a learning curve there. It's kind of like Twitter. You can post a really funny Twitter, but if nobody retweets it or likes it or whatever, you're kind of like, okay, maybe just I found that funny. So it's again, and I think they're very used to that with social media, good or bad.
Yeah, Lynn. Yes, stir up conversation, not necessarily to answer. Yeah, just to get kind of the conversation moving. Maybe it's just like an additional question for them to think about as well. Yeah, that's a really good point. So that actually brings us to the end of our session today. Thank you all so much for joining us, Stephanie, and I know Bryan's not here. Thank you guys for being on here and answering all these questions and providing our insights on Packback. And we appreciate you all for joining us. And if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to the Packback team. They'll be happy to answer anything that y'all might have. So thank you all.